weaker?
Well, when we talked a week ago, I had mentioned that I didn't think that any package could ever be enough in the face of the COVID crisis, and the only thing that's going to matter is what happens on the virus front. And so obviously we got a good news today, but like you just mentioned, this is going to be, so let's talk about the two issues, the package and the vaccine. On the package front, I think it was okay, but, there was no magic bullet. The government has no magic bullet. India has the strictest lockdown in the world, which means it has the weakest economic outlook in the world, because the stricter the lockdown, the bigger the effect on the economy. It's very simple. There's no complexity about it. So you can't have the strictest lockdown without having the biggest economic fallout. So India is already going through that. Whatever the government is doing is highly inadequate given the magnitude of the economic impact. So I think then when we come to the vaccine front, remember that this is phase 1 trial has been shown good results. I believe it's going into phase 3. I'm no expert on drug trials and whatever is involved. But the one thing that we do know is if the vaccine is proved over time to work in the different phases, it's going to take a long time to be able to produce enough to be able to inoculate, billion-plus people in India, as well as billions of people around the world. So there will be some time lag from when we have. So I would suspect at the most optimistic case, we're 6 to 9 months away from having broad-based availability of the vaccine, and more likely 9 to 12 than 6 to 9. So there is going to be an economic fallout, but I think once we get some light towards the end of the tunnel, and we can hope that this is, then the markets can look through the near term and hope for the other side. But I think the real challenge is going to be in the next 6, 9, 12 months, however long it takes, if this one works out, what is going to be the economic hit and what will be the lingering effects once we do have a vaccine, because it's not like magically all the economic problems of businesses that have gone through horrific slowdowns, loss of revenues, piling on of debt will be suddenly able to spring back to life as normal. So I think that's the real challenge. And there I think India has got as much, if not more challenges than any other major economy in the world in terms of went in with a weak economy and a weak financial system or troubled financial system, and is going to come out with an even more troubled and more weaker financial system and weaker businesses. So it will be quite a long road to get back to to a healthy stage.
Okay. Fair enough. Arvind, good morning. And that is what my next question was. Weaker financial system, weaker economy. How much of that is now in the price, say, of the bank nifty, which has more than halved from its highs or from its peak, but marquee stocks like HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, Kotak, Bajaj Finance, they have seen 30 to 50% decline. How much is now in the price in some of these marquee names? So, or do you think we should be prepared for more downside in some of these big names?
Well, I mean, I think I think that some of the unsecured lending or low security lending, that NBFCs have done, even high flyers like Bajaj Finance, I'm not sure that they have seen a cycle like this before. So I'm not sure what equivalent period to use to say this is cheap. And are we going to go back to where we were before we went into this crisis in terms of the same type of lending, the same type of approach? So I think one has to be careful. There are some of the high quality banks like HDFC and Kotak that have been through many of these cycles and have generally managed their risk profile much better. So I feel much more comfortable about those high-quality banks. But I think the list is rather narrow, but I think there will be good quality companies, whether it's in the banking space or elsewhere, that will be attractive. As I've said all along, I'm not in a rush, but I think, if we are moving in this direction in the next 3 to 6 months and maybe sooner, there will be opportunity to buy stocks. But again, today will be a rally, and it's not like anything is running away from us, that the financials are going to go straight up from here. I'm still not a believer that we have a V-shaped recovery in either the market or the economy.
Okay, there's no V-shaped recovery, neither the market or the economy. But Arvind, just one follow-up question to the point you were making about India. Do you think Indian markets will continue to underperform most global and emerging markets because of, as you said, the inability of the government to manage the economic damage given the fiscal constraints, and also the fact that the lockdown, despite being so severe, is not resulting in any improvement as far as the, cases are concerned? Do you think India will continue to underperform?
I think the liquidity is so much in the markets that it's going to spread around, right? So right now, obviously, the U.S. market has been leading the way, but I do expect that other markets, emerging markets like India, will benefit. But I do think you've hit the nail on the head. We need to see signs that the government can start to ease, and for that, the cases to start falling. Remember, after 4, 5, 6 weeks of lockdown, you've seen a reduction in new cases of pretty meaningful magnitude in major badly hit countries in Western Europe and in the U.S. Because once you ease the lockdown, your cases are going to rise. But if you kind of cause the curve to flatten and bend over, then you can rise from a lower level. India is not at that level of cases yet. So I think there will be a rally in India. There will be liquidity that will spread. And I think markets with free money floating around will rise everywhere. But for India to outperform, which is your question, I think we will need to see enough data to give us confidence. Obviously, India has been much less hit on COVID. But the reality is it's been going to be much harder hit on the economy. And the government has to watch what happens to COVID cases as we go into the monsoon season. Is that going to be a challenge or not? So there are some question marks about the progression of COVID in India, whether the curve does bend. And I think, that's part of the thing. And one of the things I think challenge for India is the number of tests. The testing is still minuscule compared to, many other major countries on a percentage of population basis. So, I would like to see, and I think investors would like to get more confidence that the testing is widespread enough that the data on, infections and everything else is completely, fully developed, and therefore the government can have confidence in opening up in a meaningful way.
Oh, yes. There are too many problems surrounding us. But Arvind, therefore, you don't buy anything at all now in India?
No, I've been I have been buying into pullbacks when stocks get into my range, and so I am buying high quality stocks.
Which kinds?
But I am sitting on cash, but I am buying.
No, which kinds do you look at? Is it only pharma stocks? What attracts you?
No. I'm looking at domestic demand stories. Retail that has been hard hit. Some of those names get interesting. Some of the high quality banks we just talked about, that becomes interesting. Some other domestic, demand stories that serve several specific niches. We're looking at individual names across the spectrum that are domestic facing. So far, we've been owning names in the IT and pharma and domestic medical space largely, but we are looking at domestic names slowly as we feel that the reality is setting in, that there is no magic wand here. We're able to buy high quality names patiently at our levels.
Okay, no, just to repeat the point here, Arvind, the market texture is changing, right? I mean, if you see in the index, the weight of the financials is coming down, IT is going up, Reliance is going up, pharma is going up. Do you think that story has to play out more, or is this just a temporary phase and banks will be back in leadership position? What would be your prognosis?
My prognosis is that this is a significant enough break from the past that we will not go back to where we were in, life as we knew it or markets as we knew it in 2019, early 2020. Therefore, I don't think that, the financial system is going to spring back to being the market leader. It doesn't mean that it won't bounce from here, but I think there'll continue to be a distinction between the haves and the have-nots, and I don't think there is any magic bullet to repair, some of the NBFCs that are going to be significantly impaired. That's not coming back. So some of the leading banks might gain market share, but as a sector, I'm not sure that there will be the kind of leadership that it had in the last cycle. I do think that healthcare will gain at the benefit of other sectors, since that'll become a point of focus not just in India but around the world in terms of increased awareness of spending and both by individuals and by governments, more health insurance. So health insurance related companies could benefit. So I think there will be more of a focus on those kind of companies, as they may not become the biggest weightage in the market, but their weightage in the market going forward will go up.
Okay. Actually, Arvind, we've been witness to some terrible news on the employment front. We have news about the airlines. Indigo today has announced, or rather in the last 24 hours, has announced further cuts in salaries and jobs. And then we heard it from Uber, we heard it from, Swiggy, and all in thousands, 1,100 jobs, 2,000 jobs cut. So how do consumer companies rank? Because as it is, a Nestle and HUL are still trading above 50 times.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, again, when you mentioned those names, those may not be the ones
that you're looking
make
at
the most sense. But yeah, that may not be the ones. But I think it is a little disappointing, I must say, in terms of the package, which I thought was, reasonably okay done given the constraints that the government had. But I'm surprised that a big employment sector, anything related to tourism, hospitality, travel, has been completely left in the cold. And I think, the damage to the economy and to a lot of jobs that are not going to come back quickly is going to reverberate through the economy. So I think you make an excellent point that demand in many pockets are going to have a hard time bouncing back. But I think, if you look at people who are retailers who are focused on tier 3, tier 4 cities, I think that's a market that is not impacted. That's not where the coronavirus hit. That's not where tourism was taking place. So, you can find specialized niche, more, facing specific pockets of the economy where things could bounce back quicker, whereas industries or suppliers to businesses which are going to depend on, the urban economy, the tourism economy, the travel economy, those are going to be a long, long time coming back.
Well, one sector that has had absolutely no problem in the lockdown is the telecom space, right? So the big headline this morning is Bharti's numbers, which have been very strong, both in voice as well as in data. Your thoughts here? Do you think this is a structural story that still has more legs, or do you think the best of the news is already in the price for telecom?
I think the telecom story is just begun. I think this is a huge, I forgot to mention a sector that we are involved in. I think this is going to give a boon to, online consumption of data, of every other thing in a way that nothing else could have done. And this is global. This is not just India, but clearly it'll happen in India too. It'll be a big boon. You were already seeing, data growing rapidly, smartphones growing rapidly. This will just make the consumption even more turbocharged. And remember, now it's, for all practical purposes, a two-player market. So therefore, the players have a lot of room to gain both, revenues and profits. And I think Bharti could be, a huge win. Obviously, Reliance is the headline name that everybody is getting the headline news on. But people have forgotten that Bharti, is a very strong number 2, and the value of their franchise is going to be, it's going to become more apparent in terms of the earnings power that emerges in the next few years.
Absolutely. The last earnings, which Sonia will detail in a minute, have been very good. Thank you very much, Arvind Sanger, for giving us the benefit of your analysis this early in the morning for us and late in the night for you. We have to take a break on that note. And thereafter, entire research team with us to tell you the list of stocks they watch.